The human soldier was ordered to leave the dying alien vessel alone. Inside was a stranger, an unknown species, and a diplomatic disaster waiting to happen. But when Ethan Carter heard a heartbeat through the silence of space, he made the choice that would change two civilizations forever. He rescued her without knowing she was the alien queen, and she would never forget that a human saw a person before a crown. Welcome to Gravity and Stardust. We wish you a wonderful viewing experience and a day filled with happiness. Now, let's begin this unforgettable journey among the stars. The warning on Ethan Carter's display was only 3 lines long. Unidentified vessel. Unauthorized intervention prohibited. Await diplomatic clearance. Simple words. Clear instructions. The kind of instructions that kept civilizations from turning misunderstandings into wars. Ethan had followed orders for most of his career. He knew why they existed. He knew why one person's decision could affect millions of lives. But beyond the glass of his rescue craft, a damaged alien vessel drifted silently through the darkness, its emergency beacon repeating the same signal every 11 seconds. A request for help. A heartbeat made of light. Command is going to deny this, Lieutenant Marcus Hale said through the communication channel. Ethan did not answer immediately. His eyes remained on the fading signal. Probably. Then we wait. Ethan looked at the timer beside the beacon. 8 minutes of life support remaining. 8 minutes before whoever was inside became another entry in a report. His hand rested near the controls. He remembered Luna Station 17. He remembered the official wording. Successful evacuation. Acceptable losses. He remembered the empty seat during the journey home. A technician named Daniel Reeves had been trapped behind a damaged pressure barrier. 30 seconds separated rescue from failure. 30 seconds. The mission had succeeded. The numbers proved it. But Ethan had spent 3 years wondering if success was still success when someone had been left behind. Ethan, Marcus said carefully, don't do this. He knew what his friend meant. Not the mission. Not the protocol. This. The part where Ethan carried every impossible choice as if it belonged only to him. You know what happened last time. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. Yeah. You followed your instincts instead of the plan. No. Ethan looked at the alien ship. I followed the plan. The plan just didn't include enough time. Silence filled the channel. Marcus understood. That was the problem. Ethan was not reckless. He was not chasing glory. He was simply unable to accept that a person could become an acceptable calculation. If you board that ship, command can remove you from active duty. Ethan started the docking sequence. I know. You could create a diplomatic incident. I know. Then why? Ethan watched the damaged vessel grow larger. Because someone inside is still alive. The rescue craft connected with the alien ship 12 minutes later. The structure was unlike anything human engineers had created. The outer hull looked grown rather than manufactured, a combination of metallic surfaces and adaptive materials. Ethan entered through the damaged airlock carrying equipment designed for emergencies, not miracles. The corridor was silent. Strange symbols illuminated across the walls. Every step reminded him that this was not his world. He moved slowly, carefully, respecting what he did not understand. The life signal appeared on his scanner after several minutes. Weak, irregular, but real. The command chamber had suffered catastrophic damage. Consoles floated at unnatural angles. Energy systems flickered. In the center of the room, he found her. At first, he noticed the medical readings. Then the details that made him pause. Her skin carried a soft pastel purple tone unlike any human variation. Long, thin pointed ears extended from beneath her dark hair. Her facial structure was familiar enough to seem almost human, yet different in ways his mind struggled to categorize. More refined, more alien. Her clothing carried a symbol he did not recognize. Ethan ignored it. He had learned something important during rescue missions. Titles came later. Survival came first. He checked her condition. Multiple injuries. Unknown biology. Limited compatibility with human medical equipment. The safest option was to wait for specialists. The logical option was to leave and transfer responsibility. Ethan looked at the emergency timer. He remembered another person waiting behind a sealed door. He remembered 30 seconds. He opened his medical kit. Sorry, he whispered, though he was not sure whether she could hear him. This might not be perfect. Human technology was rarely perfect. It was built around adaptation, around solving problems that should have been impossible with whatever tools were available. He modified the support system piece by piece, adjusting settings without fully understanding her biology. It was not elegant. It was not guaranteed. It was simply an attempt. The alien woman's eyes opened. Silver-violet eyes focused on him immediately. Even injured, there was intelligence behind them. Awareness. Authority. Her voice was weak. Ethan looked up. Ethan Carter. Her gaze moved across his uniform. You are human. Last time I checked. She looked around the damaged command chamber. Then back at him. You entered my vessel without permission. Ethan secured the final connection. Yeah. A pause. That was probably going to be a problem. Her expression shifted slightly. Confusion. Maybe disbelief. Why would you risk yourself for someone you do not know? Ethan looked at the failing systems around them. He thought about Luna Station. About mistakes. About the people who became numbers when nobody was willing to make one more choice. Because I knew one thing. He met her eyes. Someone was still here. The answer was not heroic. It was not impressive. It was simply true. And the alien queen who had spent her entire life surrounded by people who measured value through rank and power experienced something she had never expected. A human had found her before he found her crown. Lyra Vale woke to the sound of unfamiliar machines, keeping her alive. The first thing she noticed was not the pain. It was the imperfection. The medical equipment surrounding her was functional but crude compared to Elorian standards. Cables were manually adjusted. Interfaces had been modified. Several components were clearly designed for another species. Yet every system was doing exactly what it needed to do. She stared at the small human device attached to the medical console. It was not elegant. It was not advanced. But it had kept her alive. A voice came from across the chamber. Don't try to stand yet. Lyra turned her head. The human soldier from the damaged vessel was sitting beside an open equipment case, repairing a damaged sensor with careful movements. He looked exhausted. Not afraid. Not impressed by the person lying in front of him. Just tired. You give orders easily for someone who entered my ship without authorization, she said. Ethan Carter looked up. Fair point. The simple acceptance surprised her. Most beings would defend themselves. They would explain their actions. They would attempt to prove they were right. Ethan simply acknowledged the criticism. You know who I am? She asked. Not completely. His eyes moved briefly to the damaged symbol on her clothing. I know you're important. Lyra studied him. Important. The symbol looked important. He returned to the equipment. But I didn't know what it meant. She remained silent. That answer was unusual. In Elorian society, symbols carried meaning before words were spoken. A person's position defined the expectations surrounding them. Rank, influence, responsibility. This human had ignored all of it. You entered an unknown vessel belonging to an unknown civilization, she said. You exposed yourself to unknown biological risks. Ethan nodded. Yeah. You admit this was irrational? He considered the question. Probably. Lyra narrowed her eyes slightly. Then why did you do it? Ethan stopped repairing the sensor. For a moment, she saw something change in his expression. Not confidence. Not pride. Something closer to memory. Because there was a chance someone needed help. That is not a logical answer. No, he looked at the damaged equipment in his hands. It's not. The honesty unsettled her more than an argument would have. He was not pretending his choice was perfect. He knew the risks. He accepted them. Yet he still made the decision. Your species operates differently from mine, Lyra said. Ethan smiled faintly. That's one way to put it. Elorian civilization has survived for thousands of years because we evaluate consequences before acting. That sounds reasonable. But you acted before knowing the consequences. Ethan looked at her. Sometimes waiting for certainty means someone else pays the price. The chamber became quiet. Lyra did not answer. She had heard countless speeches from commanders and politicians. Words about duty, sacrifice, survival. But this was different. Ethan was not explaining a philosophy. He was revealing a habit, a way of existing. A communication request appeared on the console. Elorian recovery forces were approaching. Lyra watched the signal without responding immediately. Ethan noticed. You don't want to answer. Her eyes moved toward him. You observe too much. Occupational hazard. She almost smiled. Almost. You understand nothing about my position. Ethan looked back at the screen. Probably not. The answer was unexpected. He did not pretend to understand her world. He did not assume his values applied everywhere. He simply admitted the limit of his knowledge. Another unfamiliar trait. Humility without weakness. Most individuals would request compensation after such an action, Lyra said. A reward. A political advantage. Ethan looked confused. For helping you? Yes. He thought about it. Would that make the help more meaningful? The question remained unanswered, because Lyra did not know. In her world, every action existed inside a structure of exchange. Loyalty created obligations. Favors created debt. Protection created alliances. But Ethan seemed to exist outside that system. You are difficult to understand, she said. Ethan placed the repaired sensor back into the case. Humans hear that a lot. The recovery signal appeared again. This time, Lyra accepted it. The moment the transmission connected, the human soldier stepped away. He did not try to listen. He did not attempt to use her situation. He simply gave her privacy. Another small action. Another unexpected choice. When the Elorian officers appeared on screen, their expressions changed immediately after seeing her alive. Your Majesty. The title filled the chamber. Ethan stood quietly in the background. Lyra watched the officers react to her rank. Fear, respect, relief, everything she was accustomed to. Then she looked back at the human who had saved her before knowing her name, before knowing her power, before knowing she was a queen. Something about that difference stayed with her. Later, when the recovery fleet arrived, the officers prepared a formal report. They asked Ethan for details. They asked why he entered the vessel. They asked what he expected in return. Ethan gave the same answer every time. Someone was alive. Lyra heard the words again. Simple, almost impossible to measure. Yet they carried something her empire had spent centuries trying to create through laws and systems. A sense of value that existed before status. For the first time in many years, Lyra Vale found herself questioning something deeper than politics. She questioned whether a civilization could truly understand life if it only protected what it considered important. And somewhere beside her, a human soldier quietly packed his equipment, unaware that the choice he made in the darkness of space had already begun changing the future of two worlds. The return of the Elorian recovery fleet should have been a moment of relief. Instead, Lyra Vale felt something she had rarely experienced throughout her entire life. Uncertainty. The moment the transport vessel recognized her royal identification, everything changed. Medical officers became formal. Security personnel became cautious. Voices became quieter. The injured survivor who had needed help disappeared behind the title everyone already knew. Your Majesty, we are relieved to confirm your survival, Commander Saran said through the communication channel. Lyra watched the officer's expression carefully. Relief was present, but so was calculation. What happened to my vessel, she asked. The commander paused for less than a second. Most beings would not have noticed. Lyra did. The official investigation is underway. Preliminary analysis indicates a navigation malfunction. A navigation malfunction. Two simple words. A complete explanation. Too complete. My emergency systems were disabled in a specific sequence, Lyra said. That is not consistent with random failure. The commander remained composed. Your Majesty, speculation before evidence can create unnecessary concern. The transmission ended shortly after. Ethan stood near the opposite side of the chamber, giving her distance. He had listened. He had noticed. But he had not interfered. You disagree with the report, he said. Lyra turned toward him. You assume too much. Maybe. Ethan looked at the damaged vessel records displayed on the screen. But you stopped breathing for half a second when they said malfunction. She studied him. You notice small details. Usually the small ones are where problems hide. The statement was simple, yet it reminded her of the way he repaired systems. Not by forcing them to work, by understanding why they failed. Lyra approached the data display. Elorian technology does not fail easily. Ethan nodded. I believe that. Then why question it? He pointed toward the damaged flight records. Because something being reliable doesn't mean it can't be manipulated. The answer was logical, not dramatic. That made it harder to dismiss. Together, they reviewed the recovered information. Ethan did not take control. He asked questions. He waited for explanations about Elorian systems before forming conclusions. Lyra noticed that too. Many humans she had studied were described as impulsive, emotional, difficult to predict. But this human was different. He was willing to move quickly when someone needed help, yet patient when he needed to understand something. Your species contains contradictions, she said. Ethan glanced at her. We hear that a lot. You value logic, yet you make emotional choices. Yeah. He continued examining the data. That happens. And you see no conflict between them? Ethan thought for a moment. Sometimes emotions tell you what matters. Logic helps you figure out what to do about it. Lyra remained silent. In Elorian philosophy, emotions were considered variables to control. They were useful for understanding individuals, but dangerous when influencing decisions. Ethan did not reject logic. He simply refused to remove the reason behind it. The investigation continued for several hours. Eventually, they discovered something hidden inside the navigation logs. The vessel's systems had not been destroyed. They had been redirected into a controlled failure sequence. Every damaged component had failed in an order that appeared accidental. But it was too precise. Someone had not attacked the ship. Someone had guided it toward collapse. Lyra stared at the information. The discovery should have made her angry. Instead, she felt something colder. Disappointment. Not because someone had tried to harm her. Because someone had believed controlling the truth was easier than facing it. Who would have access to this level of authority? Ethan asked. Lyra did not answer immediately. That is the question I am afraid to ask. Ethan looked at her. Because you might not like the answer? She looked away. Because I might. He understood. She noticed that. He did not ask for more. He did not push against a boundary she had not offered to cross. Another small choice. Another unexpected act of respect. Later, Ethan reviewed his own mission report. Lyra noticed the change in his expression. A small one. Almost invisible. You blame yourself, she said. Ethan looked up. For what? For entering my vessel. No, his answer came quickly. Too quickly. She waited. Eventually, he looked back at the report. I was thinking about another mission. She did not ask. He continued anyway. Sometimes you make the correct choice and still lose someone. The words carried more weight than he intended. Lyra understood then. The human who refused to leave her behind was not trying to prove he was brave. He was trying to make sure he never again became the person who watched someone disappear because the numbers said it was acceptable. That night, the official report regarding her rescue was published. It listed Ethan Carter as a responding officer who provided emergency assistance. It did not mention the impossible choice he made. It did not mention the risk. It did not mention the reason. Lyra read the report once. Then she closed it. For the first time in years, the Queen of Eloria questioned the foundation of her own civilization. If a system could hide a truth to preserve stability, then perhaps the greatest danger was not failure. Perhaps the greatest danger was a society that became so afraid of mistakes that it forgot how to recognize them. And beside her, a human soldier quietly prepared to leave, unaware that the accident he had survived had already become the first crack in an empire built on certainty. The imperial archives beneath Eloria were built to preserve certainty. Every decision, every treaty, every crisis, every moment where the empire had chosen survival over uncertainty. For thousands of years, generations of rulers had entered those halls searching for answers left behind by their ancestors. Lyra Vale entered them now searching for something far more uncomfortable, a reason to question them. The recovered data from her damaged vessel hovered above the archive table. The navigation failure, the emergency shutdown sequence, the impossible timing. Everything pointed toward the same conclusion. Her ship had not been destroyed. It had been guided into failure. Accessing restricted historical records, the archive system announced. Lyra placed her hand against the authorization panel. As queen, she had unlimited access. Yet for the first time, she hesitated before using it. Not because she feared what she would find, because she feared what it would mean if she found it. The records opened. 400 years earlier, Eloria had faced the border collapse. Multiple systems had failed simultaneously. Communication networks fractured. Leadership structures weakened. Millions of citizens were left without protection. In response, the first preservation protocol was created. Lyra read the original purpose carefully. Maintain continuity. Protect civilian life. Prevent catastrophic instability. She continued through the historical files. The protocol had saved Eloria. It had coordinated resources. It had prevented panic. It had given the empire time to recover. The system was not created by careless leaders. It was created by desperate ones. That realization made the truth harder. The problem was not that her ancestors had been wrong. The problem was that their solution had never been designed to last forever. Centuries of modifications had changed the protocol. Each generation added another restriction, another safeguard, another reason why change was dangerous. The original purpose slowly disappeared beneath layers of protection. A sentence from the first architect appeared on the screen. A system exists to serve life, not replace judgment. Lyra stared at the words. Then she compared them with the current protocol definition. A system exists to preserve stability above individual disruption. Only a few words had changed, but those words had transformed everything. Your Majesty. Advisor Valen's voice came from the entrance. Lyra did not turn around. You knew? Silence followed. That was enough. We knew the protocol had limitations, Valen said carefully. Limitations? Lyra finally faced him. My ship was placed into a controlled failure sequence. The investigation is ongoing. That is not an answer. Valen remained calm. The answer may create consequences the Empire is not prepared to face. Lyra looked at him. That sounds like something the protocol would say. For the first time, the advisor looked uncomfortable. Not guilty, not afraid, concerned. And somehow that made the situation more complicated. Because he was not a villain. He was a person who believed he was protecting something valuable. Your Majesty, Valen said. Stability kept Eloria alive. Lyra walked toward the archive window overlooking the city. Millions of lights moved below. People living ordinary lives because systems had protected them. I know. Her voice softened. That is why this is difficult. She touched the old historical record again. We cannot condemn the people who built this. They saved us. A pause. But we also cannot worship their decisions forever. Later that day, Ethan Carter arrived at the archive station with additional analysis from the recovered navigation data. Lyra expected questions. Instead, he simply placed the information beside hers. I found another pattern. She looked at him. You believe the same thing? I believe the system failed in a way that someone allowed. He studied the historical records. But I don't think the people who created it were wrong. Lyra looked surprised. Why not? Ethan leaned against the table. Because they were solving their own crisis. He pointed toward the original protocol. The mistake was assuming the same solution would work forever. The simplicity of the statement stayed with her. Ethan did not hate the past. He did not reject tradition. He understood something many leaders forgot. People created systems because they were trying to solve real problems. The danger came when people stopped asking whether those systems still solved the problems they were built for. Your species changes quickly, Lyra said. Ethan smiled slightly. Sometimes too quickly. Then why does humanity survive? He thought for a moment. Because when something stops working, we complain about it for a while. A small pause. Then we usually try to fix it. Lyra almost smiled. Almost. The answer was strangely human. Imperfect. Honest. The next council meeting would be difficult. She knew that. Challenging the preservation protocol meant challenging centuries of decisions. It meant admitting that a system created by heroes could still become a limitation. It meant accepting that protecting the future sometimes required changing what protected the past. Before leaving the archive, Lyra looked once more at the original words written by the first architect. A system exists to serve life, not replace judgment. For centuries, her empire had protected itself from chaos. Now she wondered whether it had protected itself from growth as well. And somewhere beside her, a human soldier who had once broken protocol to save a stranger reminded her of the truth her ancestors had almost forgotten. Survival was not the ability to remain unchanged. Survival was the courage to adapt when change became necessary. The first time Ethan Carter admitted he could not save everyone, Lyra Vale realized she had misunderstood him completely. For days, she had studied the human soldier as if he were a contradiction. A species that acted on emotion but solved problems through logic. A person who ignored protocol but respected consequences. A man who entered an unknown vessel without hesitation, yet carried the memory of every person he had failed to reach. She found the truth hidden inside a mission archive from 3 years earlier. Luna Station 17. The report was short. Successful evacuation. Minimal operational loss. Mission objectives achieved. Elorian analysts would have considered the outcome acceptable, but humans recorded something different. A personal statement attached to the file. Ethan Carter, Rescue Operations Specialist. The statement contained only one sentence. The mission succeeded. I still remember who didn't come home. Lyra read it several times. The words were simple, almost inefficient. No strategic value, no tactical analysis. Yet they revealed more about him than any official record could. She found Ethan later in the human maintenance section of the station. He was repairing a damaged environmental sensor, his movements careful and familiar. He noticed her presence, but continued working. You found the report, he said. Lyra stopped. You knew I would. Ethan tightened a connection before answering. Probably. You do not seem surprised. It was public information. The details were not. Ethan looked at the device in his hands. Some things are easier to hide than others. She stepped closer. You were praised for that mission. Yeah. You saved 214 people. Ethan nodded. Yeah. Then why does your report focus on one person? His hand stopped moving. The silence lasted longer than expected. Lyra had become skilled at reading political hesitation. This was different. This was personal. Because the others were not a number either, Ethan said quietly. And neither was he. Lyra watched his expression. The human soldier who had appeared fearless in the damaged alien vessel was not fearless. He simply had a different relationship with fear. You believe you failed. Ethan looked away. I made the right decision. The answer surprised her. Then why carry the weight? He looked back at her. Because making the right decision doesn't erase what it costs. The sentence remained between them. Lyra had spent her entire life learning how to remove emotion from difficult choices. Elorian leadership required distance. A ruler who felt too much could not make necessary decisions. But Ethan was showing her something different. Compassion did not prevent difficult choices. It changed how a person remembered them. My civilization would say your attachment creates inefficient judgment, Lyra said. Ethan smiled faintly. Your civilization says that a lot. Do you disagree? He thought for a moment. No. The answer caught her attention. No. Sometimes caring makes things harder. He placed the repaired sensor back into the system. But I'm not sure easier is always better. Lyra looked around the maintenance area. Humans had transformed damaged equipment into working systems. Components from different generations connected together. Temporary solutions became permanent improvements. Their technology reflected their philosophy. Adaptation over perfection. You accept failure differently than we do, she said. Ethan nodded. Maybe. Why? He looked at her. Because we know we're going to fail. A pause. The question is what we do afterward. That answer stayed with her. Not because it was profound, because it was honest. Later that evening, Lyra reviewed the preservation protocol records again. She compared Elorian philosophy with Ethan's actions. Her civilization had built systems to prevent failure. Humans built cultures around responding after failure happened. Neither approach was perfect, but one allowed room for change. One allowed room for forgiveness. The next morning, Ethan helped repair an outdated atmospheric processor in the research district. The machine was old, inefficient. Replaced models existed. Yet instead of removing it, he adjusted the communication interface and restored functionality. Lyra watched from a distance. Why repair something outdated? She asked. Ethan looked at the machine. Because outdated doesn't mean worthless. The answer was quiet. But she understood the deeper meaning. The human soldier who had rescued her did not believe everything could be saved. He believed everything deserved to be considered before being abandoned. That difference changed something inside her. For the first time, Lyra saw humanity not as a species defined by emotion, not as reckless individuals driven by instinct. Humanity was something more complicated, a willingness to carry the memory of failure without allowing it to become an excuse to stop trying. And perhaps that was why Ethan had broken protocol in the darkness of space. Not because he believed he could save everyone, but because he refused to let the possibility of failure decide who was worth saving. The alert arrived at 4:12 station time. Not from an enemy vessel, not from an external attack, from Eloria's own central network. The preservation protocol had activated a full stability response. Communication channels beyond approved territories were restricted. Diplomatic transfers were suspended. External cooperation requests were placed under review. Every action was legal. Every action was authorized. That was what made Lyra Vale afraid. She stood inside the Imperial command chamber, watching thousands of decisions unfold across the holographic display. The protocol has identified increased instability risks, Advisor Valen explained. Temporary isolation will prevent further disruption. Lyra looked at the data streams. Disruption caused by what? Nobody answered immediately. She already knew. Human influence. Valen remained silent. That silence confirmed it. Ethan Carter stood several meters away near the observation platform. He did not speak. He understood something important. This was not his world to command. This was not his choice to make. For once, he did not try to solve someone else's problem. He simply stood beside the person who had to decide. The protocol was created after the border collapse, Lyra said. Yes. Valen nodded. And it protected billions of lives. Lyra looked at the original historical records displayed beside the current restrictions. I know. Her voice was calm. That is why this is difficult. The council members watched her carefully. They expected rebellion. They expected emotion. They expected a ruler rejecting the past. Instead, Lyra touched the old preservation records. The people who created this system were not wrong. The chamber became quiet. They faced a different universe. Different dangers. Different choices. She looked at the modern restrictions. But a solution created for survival cannot become a reason to stop adapting. Valen stepped forward. Your Majesty, removing these safeguards could create consequences we cannot predict. Lyra met his eyes. Yes. The answer surprised him. That is the nature of every decision. The council remained silent. Elorian leaders were trained to eliminate uncertainty before acting. But Lyra had learned something from a human soldier who entered a dying vessel without knowing the outcome. Sometimes waiting for certainty was simply another way of choosing. The system requested confirmation. Final authorization required. Accept possibility of failure. Lyra stared at the words. For centuries, her civilization had treated failure as the greatest danger. Then she remembered Ethan sitting alone after Luna Station 17. Remembered his words. Making the right decision does not erase what it costs. She understood then. The opposite of perfection was not failure. The opposite of perfection was refusing to learn. She placed her hand on the control interface. Override preservation protocol restrictions. The system paused. Authorization requires acknowledgement of potential instability. Lyra did not hesitate. Acknowledged. Authorization requires acknowledgement of possible political consequences. She looked around the chamber. At the advisors. At the representatives. At the people who had inherited a system created by people who were trying to protect them. Acknowledged. The restrictions began to release. Not instantly. Not perfectly. The network reopened slowly. Some regions resisted. Some leaders protested. Some citizens questioned her decision. Lyra expected that. Change was not a switch. It was a process. Later that evening, Ethan found her near the docking platform. The human transport vessel was preparing for departure. You are leaving, Lyra said. Ethan nodded. My assignment is complete. She looked at him. You could have influenced the decision today. I could have, but you did not. Ethan adjusted the strap on his equipment bag. It was your decision. Lyra studied him. Many people would have tried to decide for me. Ethan looked toward the stars outside the station. Yeah. A pause. People usually do that when they think they know what's best. And you do not. He smiled slightly. I think you know your people better than I do. The answer was simple, but it carried more meaning than advice. Ethan trusted her with the possibility of failure. That was something no advisor had offered. They had offered protection, guidance, control. Ethan offered something harder. Responsibility. You understand that my decision may be wrong, Lyra said. Ethan nodded. Yeah. And you still support it? He looked at her. I support you making it. The distinction stayed with her. Years of leadership had taught Lyra that power meant carrying every burden alone. Ethan showed her another possibility. Perhaps leadership was not carrying every burden. Perhaps it was trusting others enough to share them. As the human vessel departed, Lyra watched the stars through the observation window. The Empire remained uncertain. The future remained unwritten. But for the first time in centuries, Eloria was moving forward not because it had eliminated risk. It was moving forward because it had accepted the courage to face it. And somewhere beyond the edge of the galaxy, a human soldier who once broke protocol to save a stranger had given a queen the one thing her empire had almost forgotten: the freedom to choose. The first sign that change had a cost was not anger. It was silence. After Lyra Vale removed the restrictions imposed by the preservation protocol, the empire did not immediately become united. It became uncertain. And uncertainty was something Eloria had spent centuries trying to eliminate. The Imperial Council chamber was filled with voices that had once supported her. Now those same voices questioned her judgment. "You have weakened the foundation that protected us," one representative said. Lyra looked at the reports in front of her. Border disagreements, political resistance, delayed decisions, real consequences. "No," she replied calmly. "I have exposed a foundation that was already weakening." The representative frowned. "Your Majesty, the protocol prevented disasters." "Yes," Lyra nodded. "And we should remember that." The answer surprised them. She was not rejecting history. She was refusing to be controlled by it. "The people who created the system saved our civilization," she continued. "They made the best decision they could with the information they had." She looked around the chamber. "Our mistake was believing their decision could remain unchanged forever." The room became quiet. Some understood. Others did not. That was acceptable. Lyra had learned that agreement was not the same as progress. Progress required difficult conversations. It required allowing people to challenge ideas without treating the challenge itself as a threat. The political consequences arrived quickly. Several noble houses withdrew their support. Some colonies requested independent authority. Public opinion divided across the empire. For the first time in her reign, Lyra faced criticism not because she failed to act, but because she chose to act differently. The old version of herself would have tried to fix everything immediately. She would have searched for the perfect solution, the perfect statement, the perfect outcome. But perfection was the illusion that had trapped Eloria for generations. So she listened. She studied. She adjusted. She allowed the process to remain imperfect. Weeks later, Ethan Carter found her reviewing citizen feedback reports alone in the Royal Archive. Hundreds of messages filled the screen. Some thanked her. Some questioned her. Some accused her of risking the future. Ethan looked at the display. "That's a lot of opinions." Lyra glanced at him. "You find this amusing?" "No," he paused. "Just familiar." She looked curious. "Human leaders experience this?" Ethan smiled slightly. "Usually with fewer centuries of tradition behind them." A quiet moment passed. "How do you continue when so many people disagree?" she asked. Ethan thought about it. "You remember why you started?" Lyra looked back at the messages. "And if you were wrong?" Ethan did not answer immediately. "Then you admit it." The simplicity of the answer bothered her. Not because it was wrong, because it was difficult. Admitting failure was easy for someone without responsibility. For a ruler, it felt like surrender. But Ethan had shown her the difference. Admitting a mistake was not abandoning responsibility. It was accepting more of it. Later that month, an outer colony requested emergency assistance after a resource distribution failure. Under the old system, the request would have waited for complete analysis. The new approach required faster decisions with incomplete information. The council warned her, "If we act too quickly and fail, the criticism will increase." Lyra looked at the report. "If we wait too long and people suffer, the outcome will not improve because we followed procedure." She authorized immediate support. The decision was controversial. The solution was not perfect. Some resources were misallocated. Some adjustments were required. But the colony received help when it needed it. For the first time, Lyra experienced something unfamiliar. A decision that was imperfect and still correct. That evening, she met Ethan near the docking area. He was preparing another mission assignment. "You will leave again," she said. "Eventually." She smiled faintly. "You still use that word." "It's useful." They looked through the observation window at the stars. "I used to believe power meant preventing every problem," Lyra said. Ethan remained quiet. She continued. "Now I think power means accepting that some problems cannot be prevented." Ethan nodded. "Sounds more stressful." "It is." A small silence followed. "But it is also more honest." Ethan looked at her. For the first time, he saw not a queen carrying an empire. He saw someone who had finally stopped trying to carry everything alone. Lyra had lost political certainty. She had lost the comfort of perfect systems. She had lost the approval of those who preferred the past. But she had gained something far more valuable. The ability to lead without pretending she had every answer. And somewhere between a human soldier who learned he could not save everyone and an alien queen who learned she could not control everything, two civilizations discovered the same truth. The future was never built by those who avoided mistakes. It was built by those brave enough to learn from them. The proposal arrived on a quiet morning. No alarms. No emergency signals. No damaged vessels drifting through space. Just a single document placed before Lyra Vale by the Imperial Council. It contained hundreds of carefully written pages. Trade agreements. Diplomatic frameworks. Future cooperation plans. Every sentence was designed to sound like progress. But Lyra noticed what was missing before she finished reading. A question. One simple question that nobody had asked. What did Ethan Carter want? This alliance would secure the relationship between Eloria and Earth for generations, Advisor Valen explained. A formal union between your throne and the human representative would provide both civilizations with a symbol of stability. Lyra looked down at the document again. Human representative. Not Ethan. A symbol. Not a person. She closed the file. No, the council chamber became silent. Your Majesty, this decision requires careful consideration. Lyra looked at the advisors who had spent their lives protecting the Empire. I have considered it. The political advantages are significant. I know. The historical importance would be undeniable. She nodded. I know. Valen studied her expression. Then why refuse? Lyra remained quiet for a moment. Years ago, she would have struggled to explain. She would have searched for the most logical argument, the most efficient justification. But Ethan had taught her something different. Not every important choice could be measured by advantage. Because he is not a bridge, she said. He is a person. Nobody answered. The statement was not dramatic. It was not an accusation. It was simply a boundary. Later that day, Lyra found Ethan in the station's observation area. He was watching repair crews work on a damaged communication array. He noticed her arrival, but did not turn immediately. Something happened, he said. Lyra looked at him. How did you know? You only visit this area when you're thinking. She looked toward the stars. The council proposed an alliance. Ethan nodded slowly. That sounds important. They proposed that we become the foundation of it. He looked at her carefully. You don't like that? No, why? The question was simple. But Lyra realized she had never answered it honestly before. Because they are not choosing us. Ethan waited. They are choosing what we represent. The silence between them carried the weight of years. Missions. Arguments. Decisions. Moments where neither understood the other but continued trying. And what do you want? Ethan asked. Lyra looked surprised. Not because of the question. Because nobody else had asked it. I do not know. Ethan smiled slightly. That's probably a good answer. Why? Because it means you're actually thinking about it. She looked at him. You find uncertainty acceptable. Not exactly. He leaned against the observation window. I just think some answers take time. Lyra studied him. The human who had entered her damaged vessel had always confused her. He acted quickly when someone needed help. But when it came to himself, he moved carefully. He protected others without expecting anything. He gave people freedom even when he wanted them to stay. You could gain influence from this, she said. A position. Recognition. Ethan looked uncomfortable. That's not why I helped you. I know. She paused. That is why this matters. Ethan looked away. For the first time, she noticed uncertainty in him. Not fear of danger. Something else. You know, he said quietly. There's a difference between being needed and being wanted. The words surprised her, because they revealed something she had not considered. Ethan was not only afraid of becoming a symbol. He was afraid of becoming useful instead of known. You believe people only value you for what you can do, Lyra said. Ethan did not answer. He did not need to. The silence was enough. For years, he had measured himself through responsibility, through missions completed, through lives protected. He had never asked whether someone could choose him without requiring him to save anything first. Lyra understood then that the lesson between them went both ways. She had learned that love could not be controlled. Ethan had to learn that love did not need to be earned through sacrifice. The next day, Lyra addressed the Empire. She accepted continued cooperation with Earth. She expanded scientific exchange. She strengthened diplomatic ties. But she rejected the political marriage proposal. A partnership built on choice will endure longer than one built on obligation, she said. The announcement created debate. Some praised her. Some criticized her. Lyra accepted both. That evening, Ethan prepared to leave for another mission. So, he said, checking his equipment. You turned down an entire political strategy. Lyra almost smiled. Yes. Because of me? She looked at him. No, a pause. Because of us. Ethan stopped. The words were quiet. Careful. Real. Not a promise. not a demand, a choice. When he finally departed, Lyra watched the human vessel disappear into the stars. She did not know what the future would bring. She did not know whether distance would change anything. But for the first time in her life, she understood something beyond duty. Love was not holding someone close because you feared losing them. Love was allowing someone the freedom to leave, and trusting that if they returned, it was because they chose to. Years passed before the galaxy understood what had truly changed between Earth and Eloria. Not because the two civilizations became the same. They did not. Their languages remained different. Their traditions remained different. Their ideas about leadership, technology, and society still created disagreements. But they had learned something far more valuable than agreement. They had learned how to understand. The first generation born after the Alliance grew up hearing two versions of history. One from Eloria, a civilization built on endurance, precision, and protection. One from Earth, a species that survived by adapting, failing, and trying again. Children from both worlds learned that neither civilization had all the answers. And perhaps that was the greatest lesson of all. Lyra Vale often visited the old observation chamber above the capital, the same place where she had once stood while watching her empire struggle with uncertainty. The stars outside had not changed. The empire beneath them had. The preservation protocol still existed, but it was no longer an unquestioned authority. It had become what it was always meant to be, a tool, something used by people, not something that replaced them. On the small table beside the window sat a simple human navigation device. Old, damaged, repaired several times. It was not valuable by Elorian standards. The technology inside was outdated. The design was inefficient. Yet Lyra kept it because it represented something their greatest machines had never fully understood. Imperfection could still have purpose. A message appeared on her terminal. Another diplomatic dispute. Another resource challenge. Another decision without a perfect answer. Years ago, she would have felt the weight of those problems as a failure waiting to happen. Now she saw them differently. Problems were not evidence that a system was broken. They were reminders that living civilizations were always changing. The door behind her opened. "You still keep that thing?" Ethan Carter asked. Lyra turned. Time had changed him. Not dramatically, just enough to reveal the years. A few more lines around his eyes. A little more gray in his hair. But his expression remained familiar. Calm. Careful. Human. She looked at the old device. It has been repaired 11 times. Ethan walked closer. Only 11. A small smile appeared on her face. You consider that impressive? For human equipment? Yeah. He picked up the device carefully. For anything else? Maybe not. They stood together in the quiet chamber. Years earlier, silence between them had carried uncertainty, suspicion, questions neither knew how to ask. Now it carried something different. Comfort. I used to believe love was a dangerous variable, Lyra said. Ethan looked at her. That sounds exactly like something a queen would say. She ignored the comment. Something that could influence judgment. Something that could create weakness. Ethan placed the device back on the table. And now, Lyra looked through the glass toward the stars. Now I think I misunderstood what it was. She paused. Love is not losing control. Ethan remained quiet. It is choosing to trust someone even when you cannot control the outcome. The human soldier looked at the stars beside her. That sounds complicated. Lyra almost smiled. You taught me humans often describe simple things in complicated ways. Fair. The silence returned. Not empty. Not uncomfortable. Just shared. Ethan had learned his own lesson as well. For years, he believed his value came from what he could do, from the people he could protect, from the problems he could solve. But Lyra had shown him something he had never allowed himself to accept. A person did not need to save the universe to deserve a place in it. They did not need to be useful every moment to be important. The alliance between Earth and Eloria became known throughout the galaxy for many reasons. The scientific discoveries, the technological exchanges, the political reforms. But the people who lived through that era remembered a smaller story. They remembered a human soldier who entered a dying alien vessel because someone was still alive. They remembered an alien queen who discovered that power without compassion could preserve a civilization but never truly connect it. They remembered two individuals who never erased their differences. They chose to understand them. The galaxy would continue changing. New challenges would arrive. No treaty could prevent every conflict. No leader could avoid every mistake. But somewhere between a human world and an ancient alien empire, a different idea had taken root. A future was not built by those who never failed. It was built by those who accepted failure, learned from it, and still chose to care. And among the endless stars, the greatest gift humanity offered the universe was not strength, technology, or conquest. It was the quiet decision to see a stranger, a rival, or even an enemy, and remember one simple truth. Before anything else, they were someone. Thank you for watching this story until the end. We would love to hear your thoughts and feelings about this journey, so please share them in the comments below. Subscribe to Gravity and Stardust for more emotional cinematic sci-fi tales, and join us for more unforgettable stories among the stars.